This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Randy Myer of Carolina Angel Network. Randy, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's good to be here on a Friday afternoon.
Great. So what was your background before investing in early stage companies? What did you do before this?
Way back in the 1990s, I had a successful startup of my own, and it started in 91. We sold it to a private equity firm. In 97, I stayed for a little while, took a little time off, did a short stint in a family business, learned about family dynamics, what works, what doesn't. And then got a rare opportunity in 2000 to ran into an old professor of mine at the University of North Carolina who was leading the entrepreneurship programs. And he said, I'm starting a new course, entrepreneurial marketing. Would you like to come teach? And of course, I had virtually no experience. But he was kind enough to allow me to co-teach with him. And in 2002, they asked me to be full-time, not a tenure track, but full-time. And so until 3 years ago, I was doing that, teaching 5-6 courses at MBA undergrad level. But then we started the Carolina Angel Network. So I've pretty much cut back most of my teaching, not all. So that was 3 years ago, and that's my background.
Great. So what excites you right now?
Well, this is a community that has a lot of healthcare. Certainly that still excites me. We've tried to stay more toward med devices and diagnostics, but we've actually done some biotech or therapeutics. I think we all get excited about AI opportunities. I think of kind of another category that we have here in the research triangle, which is material science. We have some really interesting breakthroughs in hard sciences and not necessarily in the medical or hospital space. But so it's a good mixture here of technologies on the IT side and life sciences. And they still excite me.
Great. So you see a lot of startups coming through and a lot of investors that work with them. What's your advice for those investing in startups? What do you tell them to do before they write that first check?
Well, first and foremost, they need to look at their portfolio and decide what percent of their portfolio they want to put into this category. And whether it's 100,000 or 200,000 or more, they should make that decision up front. And they should know that they're going to have to allocate that over 5-6 years. And they're going to have to leave some dry powder. What you don't want them to do is come into the first 2 deals or 3 deals they see and get so excited they spend all their money. And so first and foremost, particularly for people that are new to this field, what's your overall allocation and how do you think about what's the right number to invest in a deal when you see one that you like?
That's good advice. Keep money aside for follow-on funding. So on the other side of that table, what do you tell the startups to do before they launch that business and start raising funding?
Well, first thing is you got to know whether the dogs are going to eat the dog food. And what I mean by that is that, and probably one of the premises of Carolina Angel Network is early revenue, early customers, because I want to talk to customers. I want to know who bought, who didn't buy, why didn't they buy, what's your churn rate, and so on and so forth. Now, for seed stage people, that's hard to do, but the more research you do, the more talking to customers, that's not new news probably to most of the folks out there. The other thing I've become a big fan of, Hall, is be very careful about picking your board of directors. The easy answer is, who do I know locally? Who's been a big investor or who's my first venture capital firm? To be quite honest, those aren't value-added people. And the fact that you're looking locally means you haven't scoured far enough to find the quality people that can add value to your company particularly for what it needs over the next 2 years. And so one of the things that we've done in the Carolina Angel Network is, even though I run it, I don't take a board seat myself. I go out and find either someone in our network or someone that's nationally known to be on the board. So I wouldn't underestimate the importance of a great board. Most importantly, obviously, for the newer entrepreneurs, but importantly also for seasoned entrepreneurs who I think sometimes ignore that. But that's become a big metric for me and for our organization.
Well, that's good advice. Boards are very important and they need to be adding value for sure. So let's talk about the state of investing, angel investing, especially at a university. How do you see it evolving and what changes do you see coming up for angel investors in this area?
Well, there are somewhere just under 50 university networks. In fact, I'm co-head of something called the University Angel Network. And one of the things that we've focused on is the alumni who are accredited investors who have the wherewithal and interest in investing in early stage, and they have a high degree of loyalty to their university. So now one of the things that we've done is we've said, okay, that's who we're recruiting to be investors. On the other side, we're investing in only deals where someone in the management team or the board chair is UNC alumni or connected. And so you can think of it as UNC alumni investing in UNC alumni, basically. And what I've noticed is, because I'm in 3 different angel groups myself, going all the way back to 2002. What I've noticed is in 3 years, we have 200 members, and it has not been hard to recruit them, not just because you're appealing to their loyalty, but because entrepreneurship in many of these universities is a growing discipline within the universities. And so finding alumni who are interested in participatory has been somewhat easier than I would have expected, because I know my local angel groups have like 50, 70 people, and they've been at it much longer than we have. I think the other thing, too, is that you have an inside view of the technologies coming out of the university that allows you to track them as they're first getting sort of commercial traction. And so you got a little bit of an advantage of seeing things early. We've not invested in any technologies within the university because our criteria is you have to have early customers and early revenue, but we certainly like tracking it. So I think those 2 things make it advantageous, and I think there's a real growth going on in University Angels networks.
It is quite the affinity between the alumni and the students and the faculty that go on there that really builds a certain relationship that makes a good dynamic for angel investing.
It does. I hate to denigrate somebody, but there is a venture fund I think it's out of Boston, called Alumni Venture Group, AVG, and they basically claim to build relationships with alumni at various universities, which in fact, none of the universities have ever endorsed them or supported them, but they've gone after on LinkedIn with advertising after UNC alumni by showing pictures, trademark pictures of our school and so on and so forth. And it's really disturbing because they're really not associated with the University of North Carolina or Duke or Georgetown or any of the others that you can find on their website. But it's an offshoot that I guess every once in a while have to be cognizant that it's out there and not get deceived into believing they're associated with your university.
I see. So let's talk about your investment thesis at the Carolina Angel Network. You touched on it a moment ago about traction and customers and so forth, but can you get more specific about what exactly is your thesis and criteria?
Sure. And I'm going to start by saying, yes, first is customers and revenue. And generally speaking, we think of about $500,000 in revenue as a beginning point. I would say the average deal that we've invested in, and we've done 18 deals in the first 3 years, plus 7 second round deals with those 18. I would say the average haul is somewhere between 2 and 3 million. We've done some that are closer to 8 or 9 or 10 million. So it really is, to some degree, you can see the traction, you can see the revenue and the revenue growth and their ability to convince the dogs to eat the dog food. And so it's really scaling is, do they have the wherewithal to scale? I know that most people will also then move immediately to the management talent and the quality of the talent. But I would come back to, we've had a couple of them that are only a couple of years out of college and out of UNC. And again, it's a balance of the board and the entrepreneurs. So yeah, you look at the entrepreneurs, you look at their characteristics and their team and their board. I think the other thing that kind of is in our criteria is this a market where they can actually sort of explain and expand on the market itself? It's not just a matter of taking market share away from somebody else. It's, can you grow the market? Is this something that either disrupts? I hate the word disrupts because it sounds negative, but is there a potential for this market to expand based on your offering or based on some characteristics going on outside of your company? So that market growth potential is another one that becomes important to us. And then there is the appeal of, is this something that's going to change people's lives or behaviors, particularly when you're on the medical side? And one of the first ones we did was rapid infusion of fluids, saline and so on. And they walked in with stories that their product had saved kids' lives that would have been lost. And so there's an appeal there. I can talk about a couple of the other ones. So you do think about, okay, does this one have emotional appeal to a community of investors and investment folks?
Very good. Can you talk about one or two startups that fit that thesis that you funded?
Well, I hate to even bring up the coronavirus because that's, the hot topic right now, but we invested in one that's called Emergo, and it's a serial entrepreneur in the biotech space that has had 3 successful exits in the biotech space. And he developed a formulation that when you get the flu, the immunological response to it is the release of what are called cytokines and throughout your body. And that's what causes you to have a sore throat and sweaty and sweat and headaches and so on and so forth, is the immunological response. Well, this drug has the potential to inhibit or reduce the flow of the immunological cytokines throughout your body. So in effect, it could replace cough, cold medicines if it works. It's in phase 2 trial right now, and we're waiting for results. So that's one example. I can, if you want me to do another one, I can, but.
Sure, one more would be great.
So we just invested in, most recently, in one called Voice. Voice is a software and hardware platform for hospitals. It's a translation service for doctors and nurses and so on that is online, real-time person that you get either your cell phone or on your iPad within about 15 seconds. They speak about 227 languages. You can get them 24/7. They've got major hospitals around the country, including Cook County Hospital in Chicago. And you can imagine the need for it in this environment right now. So, yeah, that one was very popular with our members as well.
Sound like great portfolios. Congratulations on that.
Well, I haven't told you about my crater yet. So, no,
Oh.
Everybody always talks about their successes, but there are ones that don't work out. But right.
I understand. So, well, speaking of cratering, There are many challenges that startups have to go through. Not all of them make it, of course, but if you had to call out the top one or two challenges you see your startup struggling with, what would that be?
Well, first and foremost, I think building a great team for many of these people is not a class they took at college. How to hire good people, how to fire people, how to motivate them, how to build culture. Many of these people are learning to do it by doing it. And so the challenge is to try and help them early on, particularly in the hiring process and kind of get them a coach, be involved in their culture to see how it works, and so on and so forth. So that's one challenge early on for the startup community. I think knowing when to pivot is also something that's a huge challenge. And sometimes the pivot is walk away. This business isn't working. When I teach my classes, I often say, look, set milestones that go out 2 or 3 years. And make sure you set a milestone that says, if you don't get to this point, then maybe it's time to walk away. So I do think that learning to manage the downside or the things that don't go right and how to pivot is a sign of leadership. And again, I think young entrepreneurs sometimes haven't been through that segment of their business. So I'd mention those two, Hall. I mean, we certainly could talk about growing the business and the challenges there, but those are the two that come to mind.
Well, absolutely. There are many, many challenges, of course, and those are good ones as well to deal with. You also see quite a few applications and sectors. And if you had to pick one or two that you think are good opportunities for investors to pursue these days, what would you put at the top of the list today?
Well, it's easy to say AI solutions because the amount of data that you can manipulate now and you can make informed decisions quickly. We invested in one. I'll give you an example. It's called Prion. And the easy way to describe it is think Alexa for a CEO. And so sitting in his office is a voice recognition piece of hardware. He or she says, how is my West Coast revenue doing versus a year ago? And instead of having to call in the CFO accounting person, it pops up on your screen. So the number of applications that are out there and ripe for AI applications is enormous. I mean, most people talk about the medical space and so on, but there are a lot of opportunities out there for that. I do think it's a hard one to manage through because most people get turned off by diagnostics, therapeutics, but there's enough progress that can be made internationally in drug discovery that you shouldn't dismiss it because you believe it'll take them 7 years to get through the FDA. Now we've avoided the early stage biotech ones, but ones that are in phase 2 have every potential to be quite good. And so I still like therapeutics and diagnostics. And I suppose to a certain degree, the third category is how will the search world change? Because I think one of the things that people are struggling with is how do I, particularly in B2B, but also in B2C, how do I get my message out there besides just trying to buy keywords on Google? What are the alternatives that people will use to find new products? And how will that change the way we shop and the way we all know that we're moving toward e-commerce. That's pretty clear. But so I think that would be the third one, Hall, that I talked about.
Those are great examples of good applications to pursue. The last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I suppose that the only thing that we haven't covered is really we're in a tough situation right now. It's the middle of March and early stage companies are struggling. I read a really interesting article by, I think, the CEO of Korn Ferry last week, who said, when I look for leadership qualities, of course, the ones that you and I would know, coachability, vision, growth strategy, and so on. And he said, but the fourth one I look for is crisis management. How do you handle yourself in a crisis? How do you incent your team? How do you communicate to the market? And I think it's an under-measured metric for leadership. And until recently, we didn't have anything as a basis all the way back to 2008 or 9. But I think there's some really important lessons to be learned in crisis management. It's a really good article. I don't remember his name, but it was posted, I think, a week ago or so.
Well, very good. In this day of COVID-19, something we're all grappling with, and it's important to come back and reassess how we're positioned for the future. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's Randy_Myer, MYER, at unc.edu. That's the best way. Or you can also look at www.carolinaangelnetwork.com.
Great. We'll put those in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thanks much, Hal. You be well.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Halty Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.